Hey guys, how's it going? It's Jay here and welcome back to yet another episode of Take 2 on SoundStage. Today I will be reviewing the NAD M33 integrated amplifier. Now, integrated amplifier is an understatement for this piece because I think it's a lot easier to list the things it doesn't do rather than listing the things that this unit does. It's more like an all-in-one unit. It gets pretty crazy with room correction, streaming, and it even has a phono stage. And because I am supposed to keep these videos around 10 minutes or so to not bore you to death, I'm going to go over the main things that I find interesting and personally used in this video. If you're interested in a more in-depth review and list of the things that the unit does, then I suggest you visit SoundStageHiFi.com and read the review by Roger Kanno. It was written on September 15, 2020, and you can read it by either visiting SoundStageHiFi.com or by clicking on the link below this video. Now, if you remember my review of the Purifi Eigentakt amplifier, which was an amplifier that I absolutely loved, and perhaps the first class D amplifier that I absolutely adored, and I will link to that video in the description box below as well. But the only downside was that it was not available to the public for purchasing, as it was more so to showcase what the Purifi module was capable of to reviewers and companies like NAD. Well, here the NAD M33 uses the Purifi module, but instead of buying the exact module from Purifi, NAD licensed the technology and worked closely with the guys at Purifi to make their own module with premium parts that would be befitting to the M33. Also, NAD added their own gain stage, as if you remember, the Eigentakt also required a gain stage that was designed by Purifi themselves because the gain for the Purifi module was low. And NAD also uses their own high quality power supply that they designed because if you remember again, the Eigentakt was using the Hypex power supply. So in the end, what we get is a very clean amplifier with very low distortion that outputs 200 watts into 8 ohms and 380 watts into 4 ohms with a damping factor of 800, which is plenty. So in terms of streaming, because this works as a streamer, you get AirPlay, high-res aptX Bluetooth, all these music services, which I use Tidal for the most part. You even get internet radio, and it is room ready as well. You get access to all this by downloading the BlueOS app, which you will already be familiar with if you tried or owned the devices like Bluesound, Note 2i, or the NAD M10, which most of us have heard or owned at this point because it's so damn popular. It is probably one of the better softwares out there for streaming, and it is super easy and convenient to use. So streaming is how I used this unit. It also has a phono stage for moving magnet and moving coil cartridges, but I didn't touch those. I think Roger's review touches upon that more. It also has a 1/4-inch headphone jack in the front, which I found to be quite good. A little lighter on the bass region than what I'm used to with dedicated headphone amplifiers, but it was excellent in the higher frequencies and it seemed to open things up more and just more air and sound staging with headphones. Again, it has incredible amounts of inputs and outputs, and you can read more up on that in Roger's review. But let me point out what it doesn't have. Surprisingly, it doesn't have a USB input. Now, that can be important to some people, and if it is, there is a way around it by using a converter. I believe Shit Audio sells a good one. It comes with this chunky, massive remote, which I honestly did not use 99% of the time because you can control almost everything from the BlueOS app or the beautiful 7-inch panel in the front. By the way, this screen is pretty smooth and snappy, and it has really nice graphics of cover arts when you play music. Or you can have the meters going, which who doesn't like meters, right? The M33 also has room correction built in. It uses Dirac, which is one of the best ones on the market. More on that later. We'll come back to it. Okay, so how does it sound? Well, for one thing, to destroy the hopes of everyone that watched the Eigentakt review, it doesn't sound anything like the Eigentakt. Now, don't get me wrong, the M33 is an excellent sounding unit that's well balanced overall, just with a slightly different presentation to the sound. Quite frankly, I would say that the Eigentakt was more like the Hegel H390 in the sense that it had that bottom grip more than the NAD M33. Again, don't get me wrong, the NAD M33 has bass, and equal amount of bass at that. When you hear or measure in my room, same thing. But the weight of the bass is different, and the Hegel H390 and the Eigentakt just had way more weight to it. However, the mid bass is just a smidge punchier and more focused, tighter than the Hegel or the Eigentakt. So there's some trade-offs. The NAD M33 sounds just more feathery and light in its overall sound characteristics in comparison. Things seem to float more and sparkle, while in comparison to the Hegel H390, which seemed a bit closed down on the top. The NAD M33 sounds way more open than the Hegel H390 in my opinion. Now the sound staging is massive, and I would say even slightly, just a smidge, larger than the Kinky Studio monoblocks that I reviewed, and way more open and larger than the Hegel H390. Imaging is great on all three of the units, but I find that the M33 is again a smidge better in imaging than the Hegel H390, and more comparable to the standalone amp like the Kinky Studio monoblocks, which is impressive. All four units I am comparing here, the NAD M33, Kinky Studio monoblocks, Hegel H390, and the Eigentakt, all share one similar quality that makes me recommend them to anyone that wants to listen to music for long periods of time. And that's that they're smooth on the edges of instruments and they don't pop out at you unless it's in the recording. So overall, Hegel H390 is warmer, more weight in the bass, a little bit closed down on the top end in comparison, and the NAD M33 is more punchier in the mid bass, better sound staging and imaging, and more open on the top end. So I think that gives you a good idea in terms of its sonic characteristics. Now comparing it to another well-known all-in-one unit, the name Unity Nova, which I have extensive experience with because I used to own one myself, and that unit is a more detailed sounding unit with better clarity. However, name can be slightly edgy at times with certain recordings, while the M33 is a lot smoother, much like the Hegel H390. I would say that the name SoundStage and Hegel SoundStage is similar and more intimate in comparison to the M33. M33 just has an extraordinary way of having this great soundstage. However, in terms of imaging, the name takes the lead by a smidge. I think the M33 takes an interesting spot in terms of its sound characteristics. It is somewhere between the Hegel H390 and the name Unity Nova, which means that it is more extended in the top end than the Hegel units, but certainly more relaxed and softer sounding than the name units. Now, actually talking about the sound of the M33 is a bit meaningless after all this, because as I mentioned before, the M33 has room correction. You essentially download the Dirac app. There's a free version and a paid version which allows you to tackle the entire frequency. It comes with a microphone, but I opted to use my own mini DSP calibrated microphone. You can use any calibrated microphone really, but I just liked the mini DSP because it's simple to use, reasonably priced, and it comes with its own calibration files. With the room correction, I can't say I was a big fan of what it did in my space. First off, it is important to understand that your mileage may vary because different speakers, different room. But anyways, as for myself, I was using the Alta Alisa speakers and my room doesn't have much acoustical problems to begin with, and plus I have the room fully treated. I'm lucky to have a pretty good sounding room. And Dirac didn't change much, but let me tell you what it did. It took away a little bit of bass, which I wasn't a fan of because I already placed the speakers where I got the optimal bass response in accordance to my preference. And then the biggest thing it did was it pushed the soundstage back. So now you were also getting imaging more further back behind the speakers. But again, just by a smidge. Now this is just with the normal curve that they provide. But you have 5 slots on the BlueOS app where you can save the curves you adjust yourself. So you can start with the normal curve and then work your way into adjusting it the way you like. Now a few cautions here though when you are adjusting the curve by yourself. First, you need to be knowing what you are doing, or there's a rare potential that you can damage your speakers by raising certain frequencies too much. If you are unsure, or if this is your first time, consult a professional. Second, going away out of the speaker's normal frequency response is only going to make the sound worse in 99% of the cases I've seen myself. Remember, this is room correction and not speaker correction. You can't expect to plop down a $5 speaker and adjust the frequency to make it sound like a Wilson audio speaker. Just not gonna happen. Third, and this one may surprise some people, it is not a replacement for normal acoustical panels. While room correction software can certainly be only a good thing with helping with room problems, it can't solve all of it. But if you can't have acoustical treatment, it is still better than nothing. I would actually say a lot better than nothing. Now as for me though, I liked the room correction with movies more than I did with music because the voices seemed a smidge more clear, but the bass with the Dirac was something still to be desired. Unless I ran my REL subwoofers. But that's just because I have speakers and a room that's fully within my control that I have measured and listened over and over again to cater to my liking already. I know my room like the back of my hands, but most people want something that just works. And in a situation where some of my viewers have consulted me, they just can't have acoustical treatments or can't move the furniture or whatnot. This is certainly not a full solution, but perhaps the only thing close to the solution they are looking for. Some of these individuals play around with different speakers, different components, or different cables when that's not really the problem in most cases. It's the room. I can promise you that this will fix more problems in your room and your music than the cables. That's for sure. So that's it from me. Thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe and like the video if you found this video helpful, and I'll see you on the next one.